leadership involves a commitment to the mission, to the team, and to the individuals on the team.
Hey there, friend. This is Stephanie Crevens, and you are listening to the MidLevel Leaders Hot Mess Hotline, where we share CEOs and other top-level leaderships insights from their many years of service in leadership so that you can learn to think like a CEO with innovation, with focus, with strategy. And my guest today is Blair Milo. She is currently the founding director of the Center for Talent and Opportunity, a community resource at the Sagamore Institute that is focused on closing the wealth gap for the new majority by accelerating entrepreneurship and impact investing. Blair and I first connected over our love for the notion of civil society, civil discourse, which is was a large part of the focus of my master's degree, and just us revisiting the tenets of civil society and what it means to have dialogue in the public sphere. Which, if you're anything like me, you're wishing for a little bit more when it comes to public discourse, social media, in our workplaces. Wherever humans gather, there's definitely an increased need for healthy debate, dialogue, and compassion for each other. That's a side note. Let's get back to Blair. Blair just has an unbelievably impressive resume. So before joining state government, because she was the first ever Secretary of Career Connections and Talent, a newly created cabinet position by our Indiana Governor, Eric Holcomb. And in this role, she launched the 21st Century Talent Regions Initiative, resulting in 80 Indiana counties forming regions to plan and implement strategies for attracting, developing, and connecting talent. She has been at the forefront in terms of community-led, region-wide, innovative talent acquisition programs for our state. Before joining state government, she was elected the mayor of LaPorte, Indiana in 2011, and then again in 2015, and won numerous awards because of what she was able to do for that community as the mayor, which you're going to hear some of her war stories during our podcast today. But she just led them through an unprecedented period of economic growth and community development. Before that, even, she served 13 years as a surface warfare officer with the U.S. Navy, serving aboard the USS Mason, Destroyer Squadron 50, the Surface Warfare Directorate at the Pentagon, and multiple other Navy Reserve commands. She has a BA in political science from Purdue, a master's in professional studies in legislative affairs from George Washington University. So she comes to this conversation with a ton of street cred. Not only all of this is on her resume and in her experience, she most recently completed her first ever Ironman. So when you think about strength and resilience and power, I want you to think about Blair Milo. And as we get into this conversation, you're going to learn even more as to why you need to learn some of these top lessons that Blair learned, particularly as mayor of LaPorte, and how that has carried into her career since then, and how you can use these for your career too. Let's dig in, my friend. So Blair, let's dig in. Tell me about your hot mess.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for hosting this, for being intentional about sharing these kinds of stories, because I think that they're so valuable for our learning journeys. I thought that I might reflect back on a time where there was just a whole series of hot messes all at once.
Usually how it goes, unfortunately.
Right. It felt like just a building storm in so many ways. I've had the great blessing to serve in a variety of different leadership roles and in kind of earlier points of my career, due to a Navy background, and that became the role. And so had some different kind of weird situations of messes that I couldn't believe sailors got into, that then we sorted through at various times. And I feel like there's a whole series on Navy sailors that could be had.
Maybe that's your podcast, Blair. Hot messes of Navy sailors.
could be. And man, would we have some fun with that. There's a dude who ripped out all his teeth because he didn't want to go see the dentist, and that was a choice of a solution. So spoiler alerts for for this podcast to come. But
yes,
alas, those are not the ones we're going to focus on here today. But I just give that as background of there's been some interesting situations that I've been a part of. I thought that the one that series that might be of greatest value for today's conversation would be from a time that I had to serve. I had the blessing to serve as the mayor of LaPorte, Indiana. You may know it as the hub of awesome. And,
of course, its own hashtag.
Right. It does.
I love it.
And this would have been a couple years into my administration. And again, just kind of for some background, I was pretty young when I was elected. I was 28 when I took office. And so that just brought some different kinds of expectations, I think, from the community on what my leadership was going to be, and some thoughts as to how the mission was going to be accomplished, how the team would be utilized. And so the mess that started to unfold really, I guess, a couple years in was that, I had the opportunity to keep many of the previous department heads that had been a part of the administration beforehand, the very talented individuals, and a host of experience that they brought to the mission that I really needed because of the place that I was at, that I came to city administration having been part of the Navy beforehand. And so I brought a different set of skills to the role. And so there were, really talented leaders that we had in our 12 different kind of main departments that were, police, fire, engineering, street department, parks department, city planning, all these groups. And so I had, like I said, like 12 key departments that were direct reports really to me. And so we had about 200 plus full-time employees was the size of our organization.
Okay.
And we started really getting aggressive on some of the initiatives that we were trying to push, and innovation that we wanted to create within the city. And we had to be creative because of financial challenges. And so we were taking on a lot. And it got to a point after a couple of years that two of our key leaders who had been a part of city administration for multiple mayoral administrations got to a point that they were like, this is just too much. And I don't have the staff to be able to do all of these kinds of things, and I'm just getting burnt out. And then there was another individual that had come in actually probably after the first year. And this person had come from a different part of the country. They weren't from LaPorte originally. They had responded to a opening that we had advertised for one of the leadership roles and moved to LaPorte for this. And then there was another position where there was an individual who had, I think maybe had some bubbling up issues, maybe personally, maybe within the role. I don't know what all contributed towards them, but an individual that started having some challenging interactions with the public that then I had to address personally to just kind of ask some more questions myself. And then this person got into it with me, and that became its own circumstance that had to be managed. So out of those 12 different team leads that I I really relied on their leadership, their expertise, and the work that they were doing within the mission. 4 of the 12 then were all at the same time, either of their own volition, saying, I'm not sure that I want to be a part of this level of activity within an administration, or there was one person, the one that was not from LaPorte originally, had some family needs come up back where they were from and needed to be able to move back there.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was another individual that I think was just struggling through ways that they were going to be able to put the mission first. And it quickly turned into, oh boy, how are
boy.
to deal with all of these things that feel like they're kind of crumbling around me. And I need these experts here to drive the work that the citizens have elected me and brought this team forward to do. So it was it felt almost overwhelming. It actually did feel overwhelming.
I bet.
As all of that was coming together, because I relied so much on the team. And that's just also a core part of who I am, and the leadership that I try to bring forward is that I love my team members. I love getting to understand what brings them to the mission, what makes them tick. And so when things are not working out, then that feels very personal to me. And so it was a lot of lessons in being able to differentiate the personal from the professional, and understanding people's unique needs, different spots that they're at in life. And so when we had to change out those basically 4 different positions, it was a huge lesson in faith, in remembering that God equips the called. He doesn't call the equipped.
Oh, yes.
And having the courage and the blessing of being able to rely on some other team members to start sorting through, how do we find the right people that are going to slot into these kinds of positions. That I think when we're in leadership roles, having that kind of transition and turnover within teams is just so hard, because of the care that you have for the team and for the mission. And after we sorted through all of these things, I came to see it as really such a blessing for everybody involved.
Yes, it always is, Blair. Like, I know it's so painful in the moment. I have yet to experience where it wasn't a blessing because of the turnover.
Right.
Can I ask you a quick question about, so logistically, what was you said it was 2 years into your administration. What was the time frame where these 4 folks were kind of like, the team was like, I just have this image of the team just kind of, what was the time frame where things were starting to fall apart and folks were replaced or left the administration?
I think that it was over the course of about probably 4 to 6 months.
Wow. Okay.
And
1/3 of your leadership team turning over in 4 to 6 months.
Right.
For a lot of small businesses, without the stability that a larger organization or a bureaucracy or a government brings, that could be catastrophic. So
Absolutely.
it's almost like your organization created a stable foundation for that kind of turnover to exist. So, which is a blessing, a blessing
Absolutely.
for the organization you were leading. Okay.
Absolutely. And 2 of the 4 ended up retiring. And so we were able to kind of manage that process. And
much different messaging than other departures. Yes.
Right. And so there were 3 voluntary transitions, 1 involuntary, and the 1 involuntary, as always happens in those situations, it is such an emotional draw and so much emotional energy that I think gets put into that for everybody involved. It's so hard because you want people to succeed, and they want to succeed. And I kept working through trying to think, how can we salvage this? After the situation where the individual got into it with me, that was when I realized this isn't going to be salvageable. But I want to do right by this person because they took a risk on joining this team as well, and are wanting to still do the right thing. There's just some other pieces that have to be sorted through. That individual was going to school at the time for the role, particularly, and was close to being able to reach a credential. And so we figured out a way to get to that completion point. Wonderful. So that then that still hopefully kept everybody on a stable ground, which was a rocky road throughout.
Yes. That's a beautiful negotiation point, though. Like, you didn't throw the baby out with the bathwater with this person. You're like, all is not lost. Let's turn this into a win-win situation.
Right.
And that is a theme that comes up on this podcast more often than not, is successful leaders know how to turn almost any situation into a win-win situation. It doesn't have to be a win-lose. It doesn't have to be, you're terminated, or you're terminating yourself. You're out. We no longer care about you. It's how can we continue this relationship, honor the work that has to get done, and honor your humanity in the process?
Absolutely. I had a commanding officer who's still a friend and mentor, he was my first captain of my first ship in the Navy. And he would tell us, always err on the side of the sailor. Because, we're all human. We're all going to make mistakes. But if you're in a leadership position and you err on the side of trying to see the best in somebody and trying as much as you can to make it work, then, that's going to pay dividends for everybody in the end, even if it does end up being an error. And then you just get to a point where as we did at that point, of just sort of, well, okay, where do we find the place where this can be the win-win situation in the end run here? But it's been a key leadership teaching point that has resonated in pretty much every leadership position I've been in at some point or another, that I was am really thankful to have learned early in my career.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So before we go to commercial break, you've set the scene for us. I mean, 1/3 of your leadership team turning over in 6 months. How are you feeling? You mentioned like separating out personal and professional, but how are you feeling about your ability to lead this organization? It was a town, so you had multiple constituency groups to navigate at that time, both internal and external. How were you feeling about your own leadership style at this point during this time?
I was drawn on every ounce of faith that I had at the moment, because I can remember many prayers that I was having of, God, I don't see how this works out right now. I don't know where we're going to get the expertise that is needed in these roles. I don't have it. And that's why I need team members in these types of positions. And we're going to need really talented people who share the commitment to the mission and the vision here. And we had big projects that we had just started undertaking, which had been a contributor to people feeling overwhelmed by all that we were taking on. And so it was, I'm not in a position at this point to back away from doing what we committed to doing for this community. So somehow we're going to have to find our way through it. And I'm just going to have the faith that there's a bigger plan in place here. And it turned out there was.
Of course.
And
of course.
Beautiful joys and miracles in some ways to be found. But I myself truly felt overwhelmed and that was one of those moments where I was thinking back to, what did I get myself into with this when I signed up thinking that there was something more we could do here.
Yes.
Again, it turned out there was a reason for all of that, and it was always the right call, but there were definitely moments in this season of that chapter provided many of those moments where you question it.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And so before we go to commercial break, I just want to wrap up this segment with, I heard this as I was going through my own grieving cycle from a situation a few years ago. And I heard it through Cy Wakeman, and I know it comes up in other spirituality and life coaching stuff, but if it hasn't worked, in the end, it always works out. And if it hasn't worked out yet, it's not the end. By God, is that hard to hear in the moment? That's like, if someone were to say that to me in the middle of my situation, in the middle of your situation, like, I would imagine you might want to punch him in the throat. I mean, verbally, maybe not physically, of course. Violence is never the answer, but it's just like, how dare you say that to me in the middle of going through all of this? And then the second thing that occurred to me as you're describing this situation, because you've said it a couple different times, is I know I don't have the expertise to pull this off. I don't have the historical knowledge, the institutional knowledge, the knowledge of the technicalities of what to pull this off. And I would imagine in your situation, these projects were grant funded, which come with timelines and rules and restrictions on dollars, which is how most big city government initiatives happen. And what strikes me about that is so many leaders have come to believe that they can fix anything by working harder, doing more, taking on more. And there's so many leadership situations where working harder and doing more and just pushing through and driving through is not going to cut it. And this is certainly one of them. There is no way in hell you could have covered for what 4 people with different technical expertises could pull off for your city versus what you could do, even if you were to work 25 hours every single day.
Absolutely. And you're absolutely right that there were some grant elements involved in what we were trying to do. The biggest project we were working on was redeveloping, which involved environmental cleanup, a site that had been the home of this major manufacturing facility that had been the staple of the community's economy for almost a century.
Oh, yes.
That so many people had emotional connections to, both positive and negative, many of which were negative at this point because it had been closed for quite a few years. And so it was, if we don't get this right, then we're just treading water. We're not making the kind of progress for this community that is needed. And so that was another area that I'm like, I am not an expert in environmental remediation, and I can learn some of those things, but to your earlier point, that has to then become all encompassing for me because I don't know it. And quite honestly, that's not my skill set. It is somebody else's that feels passionate about that. And that's who I want to be a part of this team. But I'm going to have to find somebody with that kind of a skill set and background. And I don't know what the field is for all of that and how I'm going to find that person that's going to be the right fit here. But I'm going to have to trust that we'll figure it out. And that became the blessing of actually being able to develop somebody into some of those different roles that had the core ingredients of what was needed, but was looking for an opportunity, same as we were.
I love it. All right, well, let's take a quick break and we're going to come back and talk about the opportunity that emerged from this hot mess of a situation. This season of the Hot Mess Hotline is brought to you by my Hot Mess Quiz. One of the common lessons that my clients learn during coaching is how to really evaluate a problem, dissect it for clarity, and then take action on the tasks that really move the needle. The Hot Mess Quiz can bring you that focus too. As a leader, your work life is full of, well, work. But according to Pareto, 80% of that work isn't even impactful. If you need to create growth and change, you need to focus in on what truly matters and what will drive new results. Take the Hot Mess Quiz by clicking on the link below, which is stephaniecrevens.com/Hot Mess Quiz. You know, just like this podcast promised, and this is in the real world too, what happens when people stop being polite and start getting real? That's what you're going to get in this report. It's going to be tailored to your business hot mess to tell you exactly where to focus your efforts first, and then how to bring your team along to get the change that you need to create. Go to stephaniecrevens.com/Hot Mess Quiz. Don't wait another minute to start becoming the pro troublemaker you've always wanted to be. Blair, let's come back. Obviously, you found the solutions. You created the team that you needed to create for the time that you needed that team for your administration. What did you learn about yourself during this volatility?
I think that there are a number of lessons that are true blessings that came about as a result. I think I strengthened my faith in the broader calling that I had to serve and the mission that we were serving, because there was nothing else I could do but rely on some of that faith at
when
the time.
All else fails, we got to go to our faith. We got to.
Exactly.
Yes.
I think it also gave me, certainly in hindsight, looking back on it, it gave me a better appreciation for being intentional and recognizing that in those moments of stress, that then the anxiety increases. And so you become much more, I think, insularly focused on the problem rather than being able to back out a little bit, maybe kind of rise in altitude and think about the broader scope of your surroundings, to recognize it's not the emergency that it feels like it is. And so let's acknowledge that. Let's back away from it to have a wider aperture on how we're viewing the situation and really the resources that are available to you and the opportunity that it's presenting in order to see things in a different light that you weren't going to see in the previous situation prior to the challenges. And so it gave me, like I said, a much better appreciation. It took some hindsight and looking at it afterwards. But that's something that now I still recall when I face challenges to this day, of new challenges that inevitably crop up, of like, remember those previous situations that felt like you couldn't tackle it before, or you didn't have the resources before, and maybe you didn't at the moment, but it opened an opportunity that you didn't know you needed. And so I learned that broader piece, and I think I learned for myself to remember that and to be intentional about keeping that focus in situations where there are challenges that I feel now.
I love that. What during the same time and looking back, because of course hindsight is always 20/20, unfortunately. I hate to use cliches, but that one I found has really held up. What did you learn about the people that you led during this time?
I think I gained a greater appreciation for different perspectives and priorities that people have at different parts of their life. and understanding more and accepting more, that those are okay. And not only are they okay, they're important
Yes.
for people to pursue their own stories, their own adventures and narratives that I can't necessarily know. But for the time that we get to have together, then, to do my best to do right by the mission, by the team, and by them as individuals, and try to keep all of that in perspective and in balance, and not apply my own lens of my story to somebody else's situation. I learned a lot more about just kind of individuals, how they process things, and about creating a platform and space within a team for developing new talent, new leadership, and how to attract that kind of leadership to the team and find it in some different kinds of ways.
What do you wish? Because you mentioned the anxiety, the overwhelm that you were feeling because of the situation, because of the actions of your team, because of the commitment to the mission and for the mission. Mm-hmm. What do you wish people knew about what it takes and what it means to be in that top level role? For you, the title was mayor, for other folks, the CEO, but what do you wish people knew that it takes to be there?
I think we touched on it in just a moment ago. Leadership involves a commitment to the mission, to the team, and to the individuals on the team. Then we have to figure out how we best serve that mission, which oftentimes involves having strong team dynamics, fun team dynamics.
Yes.
And
an underrated tool in team dynamics, in my
absolutely
opinion.
People think that it's frivolous, but it's like, if people are having fun, then we love getting to be a part of serving the mission, and we find creative outlets for an innovation for serving the mission when we're having fun. Which then goes to that third component of the individual, and understanding what motivates each individual, which is very different for each person. And so mm-hmm. I think it can at times be easy to get caught up in some of that individual component, because life demands that of us at times, and we got a lot of things coming at us that we're balancing with family, with social, conversations that and expectations that may come about. And so it can be easy to get into a cycle of feeling sort of insular in your prioritization, which makes it harder to see how that influences the team and therefore the mission. And the leader always has to keep those different levels and elements in balance.
Yes.
And so I think that what became the opportunity with some of the new team members was that they understood elements of that, and we each had a similar level of skin in the game here for success of the mission and the team, because I was providing leadership opportunities to individuals who were earlier in their career, that were it not for this kind of an opportunity, they might not have the kind of freedom to innovate and explore the way that I was going to need them to, which was what became so beautiful about the team that emerged. And
yes,
it just was an important dynamic for those new team members to understand the mission and the team dynamics, and to then think about how they could bring their best selves into that environment to best serve the city of LaPorte and be as awesome as we could be.
Yes. Last question, and I'll let you get back to creating more awesomeness for your current organization. What do you wish mid-level leaders would do to support the organization and leaders like you during these moments of crisis?
I think having that perspective of understanding all of those priorities that the leader is having to balance is just in and of itself is huge. So with that perspective, being able to think through what kinds of initiative might I be able to take to alleviate some of the challenge that I see building here? How can I be a solution to different challenge areas that I maybe see, and maybe the leader doesn't necessarily see because they're trying to balance all these different perspectives, being a part of a solution instead of being just bringing forward more challenges in a complicated, complex situation to begin with. And I see so many people do that, but I've been guilty of it myself, of that there are times that it feels so overwhelming that you get focused on your part in this, the whole scheme of things, without taking a step back to realize and try to have some empathy for the leader of what they may be having to balance, and what's within their control and what isn't, and just trying to control what you can control and be of best service to the mission and the team and that leader.
Oh, yes, that makes so much sense. You know, oftentimes I coach my clients on control your own controllables, right? Like there's a circle of concern that we can see, but we can't control. And we have to give grace to our leaders to understand that even though they're in probably way more meetings than we are, they have more information, that does not mean that they can control all that the mid-level leader thinks that they can. It's just not realistic. I love that perspective.
And being mindful of, you know, are we placing expectations on a leader that are unfair?
Yes. Oh, I see it all the time. Yes. Chances are you are.
Right. And maybe it has to do with something that's in my own head, and not necessarily something that is being brought about by that leader. So when you draw back to, well, what are we trying to accomplish within the mission set here, and finding that equilibrium, I think that becomes hugely helpful to, like I said, the mission, the team, and that leader.
Yes. Oh, fantastic perspective. Well, gosh, Blair, thank you so much for sharing this experience with us. You bring such a unique insight to leadership because of your career in the Navy. I'm sure fire hose education into being a CEO as the mayor of LaPorte in your late 20s. That brings many unique opportunities to learn, no doubt. And then you have continued your career in public service and bringing about some policy change here in Indiana. So thank you so much for your time and sharing your experiences with us.
Well, thank you for helping share the lessons, and to the extent that we all can be a part of perpetuating the knowledge that we gain sometimes through the hard lessons of life. I think that's how we all grow. So thank you for your service and leadership in distributing these experiences so that hopefully they can help others, and look forward to hearing many more great conversations and learning so much myself too from all of the Hot Mess podcast conversations. So thank you.
I love it. Thank you, Blair. All right, my friend, that is Blair's experience leading her community, her administration, her leadership team through fast-paced innovation. I want to share with you my top takeaways from our conversation, and I would love to hear yours in the comments wherever you're listening or watching in, because your stories, your lessons will help impact other people's lives too. So here are my top takeaways. You know, we started out that conversation with Blair talking about the downside of innovation. It does lead to burnout. It does lead to overwhelm for a lot of leaders. It's hit all of us at one point or another. And it's your coping mechanisms, your stress management tools that you have that will get you through that. And sometimes not all innovation or not all places are your place to make a difference, as her leaders found out, right? This was her place to make a difference. The city of LaPorte as mayor, but those in her cabinet, not all of them, it was not their place to make a difference. And it's okay to know that about yourself. I loved her line about always err on the side of the sailor, right? As a leader, it's especially easy to jump to conclusions, but until you know the side of your people, you can't make the best decision. You can't know all of the perspectives. Always err on the side of the sailor, or your direct report, or your manager, or your frontline supervisor, whatever that title is. I'm guessing if you're listening to this, you're not managing sailors, but I could be dead wrong. I've been wrong before. You can't always outwork your problems. I love this. I feel like the baby boomer ethic is work harder, work some more, push through, drive through, and we'll get it done. And I'm not convinced that in the 21st century, working harder, working more can solve our problems many times. In this case, it was a capacity and a technical expertise issue that Blair was up against. But many of our modern day workplace problems, you cannot outwork. I know I found that to be true in my own business, and I've coached many leaders where that has been true. I need you to stop and pause and think, can I outwork this? Yes or no? And even if you could, do you want to? But chances are there is a capacity, a skill set, another resource that is missing that your problem needs in order to solve it adequately that you simply cannot outwork as a leader. Another lesson that I'm taking away from our conversation is that you have to appreciate the intention with which you do this work, because especially as the anxiety gets high, as stress gets high inside of yourself, inside your team, inside of the organization, you have to go back to that mission, that purpose for why you're doing that work, which leads me to, I think, one of the most powerful lessons that I took away from Blair's conversation is that you have to, as a leader, keep in mind the mission, the team, and the individual in that order. I think sometimes our direct reports want us to prioritize them over the mission. And for the sake of the mission, for the sake of the organization itself, for the sake of the business, most of the time as a leader, we must balance mission, team, individual in that order in order to be successful. So friends, those are my top lessons from my conversation with Blair. And again, I want to hear yours. Wherever you're watching or listening in, shoot those in the comments so we can learn from you. And if you got value from this episode and you want to get even more value from my conversations that I get to have with C-suite executives and what you can take into your career, sign up for the newsletter that you're going to get every other week so that you can get these insights delivered straight to your inbox, listen in, and start using them right away and propel your leadership forward. All right, my friends, now let's get off the internet. Let's get real, impactful work done, and I'll see you soon.